Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining my session on creating meaningful consumer engagement in 2022. So let's get started. So going back into the core of today's topic in terms of consumer engagement. So what is consumer engagement and what does it really entail? So consumer engagement can be a bunch of things, but if you take the gist of it, it's really how both existing and potential customers, so customers that you're already serving, as well as those who might end up being customers down the line. So in terms of consumer engagement, three of the key areas of consumer engagement is looking at the kind of content that your brand is producing and the kind of content that your brand projects. So consumer engagement means that, it might be the content that you post on social media. It could be the content on your website that allows your consumers, customers, community, anybody to navigate across your website, across your social media. Maybe it's the engagement that happens when they visit you. For example, if you're in services and you have a physical office and a potential customer comes with you for a meeting, and maybe you give them some collateral at that point of time, that is also consumer engagement. So content, because it's so heavily used in different forms, like some of the examples I gave earlier, content is a large part of consumer engagement. Then it comes to channels. So we have different ways and means in which we interact with our consumers, customers, and the community. So our channels could be anything, even though, the icons here just have social media. So everything from your social media, again, to, to your website, even channels like how you would respond to a customer inquiry via phone or via email or via the chat bot that's available on your website. Those are all channels for your consumers and your community to potentially engage with you. And one of the examples that I'm going to touch on a little bit later is the importance of these channels across your customer life cycle, or across the life cycle, rather, across the customer life cycle and across the life cycle of people really getting to know who your brand is and what you stand for. Finally, you have the champions. Now, champions are an integral part of your consumer engagement strategy. Why? Because champions consist of people. They consist of human beings like you and me, who can be an essential touch point of your entire consumer engagement process. So if I were to take an example, your team, the people who work with you, who have the same brand values as you do, who understand your vision, are a very important part of your consumer engagement strategy or your consumer engagement process, because they will be interacting with customers and with the community, and they are essentially representatives of your brand. So if I take a very simple example outside of the technology domain, if you take customer service, for example, let's say you're using a particular brand for okay, actually we can use technology again. Let's say you're working you're working with a particular app, and then you run into some difficulties using that app, and then you reach out to support. So the members who are dealing with support is a part of your internal team. So there's a consumer engagement cycle that happens there, where somebody talks to you, they want to either lodge a complaint or they want to help you understand how to solve their problem. So at that point, your team has to really make sure that that engagement process happens seamlessly. So they have to know the product well, they have to be able to navigate through the customer's problem and really come out of it by delivering what the customer is expecting. And your champions are not limited to your team only. There's also your customers and community, which are very, again, key to the whole consumer engagement process, because your customers and communities, the way that they add to the consumer engagement process is a lot different to how your internal team adds to it. Because if your customers are also out there, engaging with other consumers and telling them, look, I've used this brand, these guys really helped me with my challenges, that goes a very long way in ensuring that your consumer engagement is seamless and that your consumer engagement is all the more authentic. So at the different touch points where you can get your customers and your community involved in engaging with other consumers, it's very important to consider that as well. So then if that is kind of consumer engagement, what is meaningful consumer engagement? So consumer engagement is something that any business can practice. You have a set of, you can have sort of a flow diagram or a checklist and say, okay, this is what consumer engagement means to my business. And here's how I'm going to make sure that, consumer engagement happens, because it does, right? I mean, we post on social media, we have contact forms on our website, we have people within our organizations to deal with support or to deal with complaints. But how do you make that experience meaningful? How do you really add value to the consumer engagement experience? And this is where companies across verticals, whether you're in retail or whether you're in technology, whether you are in sort of a B2B consumer market space, this is where the challenge occurs, because you know what consumer engagement is, you know what the touch points are, but how do you really make that whole experience meaningful, valuable, and how do you make sure that the level of consumer engagement that is delivered is up to par? So one key factor to remember here is consistency. And consistency has a lot to do with your brand values. So as a brand, if you project yourselves as being a brand that's very flexible, very open to customer feedback, very willing to have a conversation about how to improve your products and services. If you also talk about, how your products, going back to the technology space a little bit, if you have a technology product and you talk about how the product process is very agile, it's seamless, it can be done quickly, those brand values have to be reflected in your consumer engagement process as well. For example, if your core value propositions of your product is agility and seamlessness and flexibility, but if your consumer engagement process of getting in touch with someone for a support inquiry or for a demo takes a lot of time, then your brand values are reflected only in your product, only in your website, where you say our product is of this nature. You can download our product very quickly. You can set it up very quickly. Our whole premise is on the fact of being agile and fast and seamless. But if your consumer engagement process of getting a support ticket raised or getting an answer to your inquiry is long and lengthy and lethargic, then your brand values are not really reflected in the consumer engagement process. So make sure that the brand values that you set for your product, for your services, for your people is reflected in your consumer engagement model as well at all of the touch points. That's one of the reasons I have the customer journey right over there at the end, because consumer engagement happens at different touch points of the customer journey. So make sure that it is reflected across the board. Next is context, meaningful engagement. I'll give an example about what meaningful engagement really means. So right now, particularly in 2022, a lot of us are spending so much more time on digital channels than what we used to be. And as a result, our patience and the time that we can allocate to a particular problem is much lower. So throughout the consumer engagement process, you interact at different touch points. So let's say that you come across, you're evaluating a certain product, or you're trying to buy something. It doesn't again have to be technology, it can be anything. And there's a chatbot that pops up, who's trying to kind of help you through your purchase journey. If this conversation with the chatbot, it might be a chatbot, but maybe there's a human being at the other end. If they are not able to understand what you're looking for after they've asked you those initial leading questions, and then when you're trying to have that conversation, if there is no context, if they're not giving the customer or the potential customer the answers that they're after, and if that conversation lacks context, the person who's trying to have that conversation is going to get frustrated and go away, because the engagement is simply not meaningful. So that's why context is really important whenever consumer engagement happens. And context doesn't only apply in the example I gave you. Even with your channel channels like social media or the kind of videos and content that you create. If the content is not meaningful, if it doesn't have the right context, if it doesn't speak about what you really believe in, then there's a mismatch there, and the consumer engagement process is going to be a little hindered. Next is connect. So in terms of connect, again, with consumer engagement, it's all about connections, right? Because your potential customers, your community, they're all interacting with your brand at different touch points. They are, speaking to you on the phone, they're talking to you via email, they're coming to your website, they might be visiting your office. So there's a lot of connections that are happening there. And what's critical to remember here is you have to acknowledge and respect the interest and motivation that they are projecting towards your brand, towards your product, and towards your people. And that's closely tied in with the other point as well, conversations. So always have conversations at every point of your consumer engagement journey. Make sure that you set a space that's open enough for people to talk to you, to participate, to respond better, so that the connections aren't just limited to one-way interactions. You try to have as much conversations as possible. Simple example I can give, again coming from a technology background, is on social media. So social media is a huge part of consumer engagement, because that's one way how potential customers and community can connect with your brands. But if you look at social media right now, it's a lot of push messages. It's about, I can do this for you, I have done this for this customer, here's what we are good at, here's why you should choose us. It's all push. So the opportunity to have conversations is very limited, as a result of which your target audience and your community will not feel like participating, because they don't see it being a forum for you to participate. So how do you go about that? Make sure that your consumer engagement is more open. So if it's social media, try to also have content and posts that allow your audience to participate. Have polls, have surveys, start threads, tag people in the industry who's relevant, so that it doesn't just become an engagement point for you to say what you want to say. It becomes an engagement point where your community and your customers can also have a conversation. And the other important point here is to capture and correct. Since consumer engagement cuts across so many different areas and there are lots of things to consider, it's something that can be continuously improved. So if you don't know which cycles of your consumer engagement is working, which is not working, which should do better, which you might need to probably invest a little bit more budget in or time, you're not going to be able to continuously improve. So capturing data about your consumer engagement touch points and figuring out whether it's doing well or whether it's not doing well, having the right sets of KPIs, and then taking that data and correcting it is really important in order to continuously improve. Simple example, right? Website. How many of us have websites that you pay a lot of you spend a lot of time till you get the website up? Websites are a key part of consumer engagement. It's the first thing people are going to look at if they're interested in working with you. So you have a website, you put it up, you probably set up Google Analytics, and then you forget all about it. So you have this, you have the face of your company essentially, but you don't know if it's doing well or if it's doing not, or if people are coming and spending any time, or if they're simply not, or if they're coming to a particular page and then not bother to read the rest of the information. So that's something you need to know. So you need to have the right set of first of all, you need to have the right set of tools set up in order to capture. So for websites, have Google Analytics, Hotjar, tools that can really help you understand if this consumer engagement touch point is delivering what it's meant to. And capturing the data alone is not enough. Always go back and see if the data meets your KPIs, if your KPIs are set accurately, and collect that data, review, analyze, and correct if you feel like there are certain areas that could do better. So talking a little bit about the impact of consumer engagement on B2B technology marketing, which, like I mentioned, is my sort of world and the kind of work that I do with clients. So I'm just going to go through a quick scenario here and tell you how important consumer engagement is in a scenario like this. So I'm going to take the example of a software development company who offers mobile app development services. Now, even if you consider any consumers outside of this scenario, right? Everybody who's out there, your decision makers, whether it's the developer or the architect or the CIO or the CTO, they have limited time to make a decision because chances are that you have an aggressive go-to-market timeline, and if you want this app to be out quickly, then you need to get fast on that decision. So the consumer that you're talking to, or the target consumer, is someone who has a very limited time in order to make a decision, and they are exposed to so much information, right? We are constantly bombarded with information from social media, from forums, from the community, from text messages, WhatsApp, from our contacts. We are always bombarded with so much information, and there's only so much that we can handle. We get emails, we get calls, and even though it might not necessarily be the information that we're looking for, our minds and our personas don't have a lot of capacity to hold information. So the information that we give, the information that we distill through consumer engagement, has to be spot on, has to be accurate, hit the nail on the head and really get the message across. And as consumers, you and me and everybody here, right, we want the right level of information in order to make a decision and in order to pick the best option. So if you just look at the consumer outlook for this particular scenario, software development who's offering mobile app development services, their consumers are those who probably want to get their app out of the door within the next 2 months. They want to know what you can offer in terms of delivering the app. Do you have a team who has the right set of technology expertise? What is your engagement model? What sort of support are you going to offer after the app is developed? How can they connect with you? Are they going to have a dedicated project team for the app? Have you done this before with other customers? So they're going to want to know a lot of information. They're going to want to make their decision quickly once they've got this information. And the consumer and the information, so they are going to be, the minute, let's say they're going and searching for this on social media or searching for it simply on Google, the minute they do that, all of the remarketing and the retargeting is going to come into place. And the minute they go on LinkedIn or Facebook, they are going to get emails, they're going to get messages saying, hi, we are so and so, we offer app development services. That's how it works, right? All you have to do is have a thought about something that you need, and immediately, you're going to get a whole lot of companies who are going to try and get business from you. So that's what's going to happen in this scenario. So as a brand, as a software development company who is able to service this customer, who is able to solve this customer problem, your consumer engagement has to be seamless. So going back to the example I mentioned earlier, your brand values, your product positioning, the kind of output that you can deliver for the customer, it needs to cut across from the point of the customer, the potential customer coming to your website, going into your social media channels, filling out your contact us form, doing that first call with you and your team, the demo, all the way until the end of the engagement and even beyond. It has to be educational, because your initial goal is to educate the customer about what you can do for them. Why should they pick your company to develop this mobile app? So you have to educate them, you have to build confidence and trust in them. And again, your consumer engagement every time. So if they are on your social media, if they've seen an ad and they go on social media to find out what you do, or if they go into one of your videos, your video has to be able to educate the customer about why you are the right choice to develop this mobile app. And it has to be consistent. This is critical. Again, I had consistency mentioned earlier as well. And why it's so important to be consistent is, if they build confidence after seeing your content, after seeing your website, after reading on some blogs, let's say, written by your leadership, and then they have the first demo with you or the first call with you, and the team who does the demo doesn't reflect that same vibe and that same personality that was reflected when they initially read your content. So that means if that happens, your consumer engagement hasn't been consistent, because your website and your social media and your content project this vibe of you being a very vibrant, very energetic, very value driven company. But if your team is sort of, not very motivated, not very enthusiastic, then your whole purpose of getting to this customer is not going to be very successful. So that's why it's key in B2B technology, particularly when we are exposed to so much information. We have very limited time. We are trying to be more competitive. We're trying to make our customers more competitive. It's super important for consumer engagement to be seamless, to be educational, and to be consistent. So always think of that entire customer journey. Your customer journey might be different to another company's customer journey. So have your customer journey mapped out. Figure out what the consumer engagement points are at each stage of the journey, and make sure that you maintain consistency, you maintain a seamless experience across, and that you educate and build confidence across your consumer engagement and your customer engagement life cycle rather. That's all from me. Thank you very much, and enjoy the sessions.